Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it, especially if you love the movies?
I had a dream.
Hashem told you to dance in a tango contest?
A dancing teacher wants to tango with you?
Critics are raving about Tango Shalom. It's clever and inventive, with right chemistry on and off the dance floor.
You're a lunatic!
A funny and thoughtful family film with a warm heart and a playful spirit. From the director of My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, that's my Fernando.
Tango Shalom. In select theaters this weekend.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. Still undefined. Don't quite know what that even means, but you know what? Sounds good. I'll just keep saying it. I am Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Robcasting you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this Post-Geek Singularity community, this is Robservations episode number 743. You know, I just want to talk about things that make me happy, because there's a lot to be happy about. I know, we have to hear about things that aren't supposed to be making us happy. We're still in the middle of a global pandemic. I read a story about how a couple in Texas was actually kicked out of a restaurant for wearing masks. The manager of the restaurant said it was his business. He'd built it up, and he didn't like mask mandates, and he didn't like the fact that people were wearing masks in his establishment, and he kicked him out. Now, these were young parents of a 4-month-old child that is immunocompromised because it suffers from, or I think she suffers from cystic fibrosis. So they were going out, first time they'd gone out on the town in a while, and they decided to wear masks, and they got kicked out of a restaurant. Here's the thing. I don't necessarily believe in mask mandates. I don't. I also can tell you that I was just dealing with a friend of mine who's an emergency room physician and a doctor, and we were doing more of our medical reference series, and he pointed out, and I have to agree with him, that all of the vaccines for COVID-19, all of them are experimental. If you go by the CDC's guidelines, it'll be experimental until 2023. And Mike was saying, he said, look, I'm vaxxed. I have to be for my job. And there's all kinds of things swirling around, but everybody's angry. Like, I look at it this way, man. You know, you got to do what's right for you. But I think that we're beginning to get a little wacky in the sense that, look, I put on a seatbelt whenever I get in a car. I've never even been in a car accident. I've been wearing a seatbelt for decades. I don't feel that my rights are being infringed upon. I think it's just safe to wear seatbelts. If somebody wants to wear a mask, they should be allowed to wear a mask, going anywhere you want. And there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but I don't know. I'm hoping for a return to common sense. That's what I'm looking for. Common sense. But you know what? Up until then, before that happens, before somehow we all decide that common sense is once again our friends, let's talk about the great state of the movie business. I mean, months ago, aside from Paramount, which is a shambles, but we're going to talk about the movie business, and I'm actually pretty optimistic. I mean, not only is Tango Shalom still in theaters, to be honest, I thought it would last a week with no money No budget, no P&A really. I mean, all this grassroots marketing. I thought it'd stay in theaters a week and be gone. We're going into week 4 and we'll still be in theaters. It's pretty incredible. But you know what's more interesting? What's more interesting is, let's talk about Free Guy for a minute. Free Guy, the new Ryan Reynolds movie. That is correct. Today in Deadline, Nancy Tartaglione wrote this article about Free Guy. Free Guy banks $300 million global. 5th Hollywood title to that milestone in 2021, and a win for original IP. On Monday, Disney 20th Century Fox Studios' Free Guy crossed the 300 million mark globally, becoming the 5th Hollywood title to the milestone this year. To date, the Ryan Reynolds star has grossed $108 million domestically and $193.6 million at the international box office, for a worldwide total of $302.4 million. The video game-inspired romantic comedy from director Sean Levy is the sole original IP Hollywood movie, meaning it's not a sequel, it's not a reboot, it's not part of a long-running series like a Marvel movie. It is an original IP written for the screen, unique to itself. The only movie to get to 300 million that is an original IP in 2021, and only the second, along with Tenet, to do so during the pandemic. That makes its performance particularly notable, especially given its mid-August release came at a time of concern over the Delta variant domestically and offshore, as markets continue to see shifting COVID restrictions and or closures. To be sure, Free Guy's global tally got an assist from China, where it opened August 27th as the first major studio movie to the market after the summer blackout. Its gross there to date is $89 million, with Moyoyan now projecting a finish of RMB at 66 million, or 98 million in our dollars. It is already the third highest grossing Hollywood movie in the market since cinemas reopened in July of 2020. Elsewhere, Free Guy's offshore stats are led by the UK, Russia, which, by the way, Tango Shalom is opening in Russia, all throughout Russia. That's our next foreign territory. France, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Japan, Australia, and Mexico. When Free Guy originally released in mid-August, it was returned to the theatrical window form for Disney. The film was developed by 20th Century Fox brass of pre-pandemic yore and was inherited by Disney via the acquisition of the studio. To Disney's credit, it believed in the film and held it continually throughout the pandemic rather than send it to streaming. I see this... Oops, sorry, guys. I see this as a win. I see this as a great thing. First of all, any original IP, yes, it might have been derived from video games, and yes... obviously, which, by the way, I think is brilliant, because we've all played open-world video games, sandbox video games, everything from Grand Theft Auto to Cyberpunk 2079, whatever. I haven't played that yet, though. You know, I want it. I want to play it. Or Ghost of Tsushima, Red Dead Redemption 2. Pick your game. I mean, everyone who's played an open sandbox video game knows what Free Guy was all about. And I was just happy to see it make money. Delightful movie. A lot of fun. I don't think anyone can complain about its content, but that it was an original, very clever idea that got made by Sean Levy. Sean Levy's also like a producer of Stranger Things. To see this happen for him, and to see this, and remember, I mean, like they said in this article, this was a 20th Century Fox movie that could have fallen through the cracks because Fox was acquired by, obviously, Disney, but they held on to it. They knew it was good. So the studio brass at Disney were like, nope. We're not sacrificing on this the gods on the altar of streaming. We're gonna hold on to this movie and put it out when the time was right. And of course, Ryan Reynolds, as Ryan Reynolds was wont to do, he got behind this movie and marketed the hell out of it. And it's made over $300 million. Now, should we be jumping for joy that a movie like, well, Rob, what happened to the $1 billion box office? Who knows if we're ever going to get to that point? But $300 million is nothing to sneeze at, especially in this climate. So I like to see an original IP that shows that what message does this send to Hollywood? People want original ideas. I mean, what the hell is Hollywood going to remake in 20 years? Remakes of remakes? Halloween Kills again? I mean, what are you going to do? And in a way, it's become sort of depressing to see all of these old franchises or reboots or whatever, when really... When I was back in high school and college, we got great original IPs. I mean, I've pointed out, and I'll say it again, you've head me say it ad infinitum, but Back in May, June, and July of 2000, actually not 2000, all the way back to 1982. In the space of basically 2 months, we got Conan the Barbarian, Cat People, Rocky 3. We got The Road Warrior. We got E.T. We got Poltergeist and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. We got Tron. We got John Carpenter's The Thing. We got Blade Runner. This was all in the same 2-month period of time. All original. Well, Star Trek II was a sequel, but some people would say it was the first Star Trek movie. I'm not one of those people, but it was a time when movie making was really a chest of wonders, and when you went to the theater, the idea that something would suck wasn't even part of the vernacular, because most of the time movies would not let you down. You go to the picture shows, and everything you saw was amazing. It was incredible. Now, Free Guy, harks back to that time. It's an original IP film, and I think I could probably see it being remade in 20 years. I hope not, but there probably will be a Free Guy 2 now. I'm sure it'll be just as clever as the original, but it's great to see original IP from studios in the theaters, people going out and enjoying something new, even though, we're coming back. People are getting, as I like to say, if you're vaxxed and masked, go to the movies, see the films, enjoy yourself, just be careful and safe, but it's great to see that happen. In that same token, Variety reports, as we've talked about, other people have, DUNE. DUNE has opened in Europe, and not even at all the major European territories, but DUNE opens internationally with $36 million. Rebecca Rubin wrote this article. It was actually published a couple days ago, but I didn't touch on it in the show. DUNE, the dazzling big screen adaptation of Frank Herbert's seminal sci-fi novel, ignited the international box office in its debut, collecting $35.8 million from 24 overseas markets. It's a promising start given the hobbled state of moviegoing in many foreign territories amid the pandemic. Directed by Denis Villeneuve and starring Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, and Oscar Isaac, DUNE ranked number 1 in most international markets and had the strongest turnout in Russia. The Russians, they love their sci-fi, and we love Russian sci-fi. There's not enough of it. DUNE ranked number 1 in most international markets and had the strongest turnout in Russia with 7.6 million from 2,100 screens, followed by France, 7.5 million from 892 screens, Germany, 4.9 million from 900 screens, and Italy, 2.6 million from 740 screens. Given its ambitious special effects, it's no surprise that many audience members opted to watch DUNE on premium screens. IMAX accounted for 3.6 million of this weekend's ticket sales, representing roughly 10% of the movie's total box office revenues. Internationally, many countries still have capacity restrictions in place, and some areas, including France, Italy, and Germany, have required patrons to have vaccine passports to go to the movies. At the same time, Korea, Japan, Australia, and a majority of Southeast Asia reinstated stricter lockdown measures, meaning most multiplexes have been forced to close, and those given permission to stay open have reduced hours of operation. In a positive sign for its big screen prospects, DUNE has finally secured a release date in China at a time when several Hollywood movies haven't been able to play in the world's biggest movie market. The film will debut in China on October 22nd. DUNE is a $165 million budgeted space epic from Warner Brothers and Legendary, and it isn't opening in the U.S. until October 22nd, same day as China, when it will land simultaneously on HBO Max. Dun, dun, dun. Villeneuve was initially upset about the decision to put the one that has been engineered to be seen on the big screen on digital platforms and the same day as its theatrical release, but the director eventually came around to the hybrid strategy. One reason DUNE is premiering in North America so much later than the rest of the world is in an effort to curb piracy. Elsewhere, at the international box office, Clint Eastwood's Western drama Cry Macho crumbled in its debut, collecting a muted $350,000 from 18 foreign markets and 585 screens. The $33 million budgeted film also fell flat in North America, where it premiered day and date on HBO Max, resulting in a global tally of $4.8 million. DUNE wasn't the only Hollywood movie to entice international audiences. Disney's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings had another strong showing in theaters, pulling in $20.3 million from 43 overseas territories over the weekend. The Marvel superhero adventure starring Simu Liu, Awkwafina, has generated $140 million internationally and $176 million domestically, bringing its worldwide total to $320 million. After 3 weeks of release, Shang-Chi already stands as the 4th highest grossing movie of the year. So, despite lockdowns and not full capacity, people are going to the movies. They like movies, and I think that that it's nice to see. Even Shang-Chi, I consider it to be, yes, it's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it is a pretty original effort. And I've talked a lot about how it's a straight-up wuxia movie, which one of my favorite genres. Now, on the horizon, October 1st, we have Venom opening. Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Early notices have said how great the movie is. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It looks to be a lot of fun, and it's a short movie. It's been reported the running time is 90 minutes, a lean, mean 90 minutes. Probably, that makes sense. I mean, with a lot of the kind of visual effects you're probably getting, the shorter the better in terms of costs, keeping those costs down. But I think Andy Serkis is probably, director Andy Serkis, working at this budget level for the very first time, being a veteran of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, and of course King Kong, and the Planet of the Apes films. I think Andy Serkis has probably by this time really learned his way around directing a CG character blockbuster. So it's going to be, I'm really excited for Venom: Let There Be Carnage. A lot more excited than I was for the original Venom. So we have that on the horizon, and of course, opening next weekend, well, on the 30th, I guess, we have the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die. It's been a long wait for me as a lifelong Bond fan. I can't wait. It's the longest Bond film. I just have a feeling. I've not been a fan of the last two Bond films, Skyfall or Spectre. I know everyone's like, Rob, what? You didn't like Spectre? I thought Spectre was boring, and Skyfall was not. I wanted to like it more than I did. I mean, I understand why people like it so much. It was a movie where James Bond continually failed, and he failed in his main objective, which was to save the life of M, which, of course, spoiler alert, didn't happen. So but I'm still a lifelong James Bond fan. Even bad James Bond movies are entertaining to me. I grew up with them. This is the 25th official Bond film. Of course, it doesn't include things like the original Casino Royale, the parody from the 60s, or Never Say Never Again. But I'm very, very excited for No Time to Die. I think it looks great. It's Daniel Craig's swan song as the character. And it's a murderer's row of movies in December. You've got No Time to Die, you've got Venom, you've got Halloween Kills, you've got Dune, and many more are coming out. And October is a really exciting month, I think, at the movies. There's something coming out every weekend. Now, of course, the flip side is the whole industry might go on strike. Hopefully that won't happen. I understand why this is going to happen, though. If it does, it makes a lot of sense, because in this changing landscape, you just never know what's going to happen. Obviously, streaming and this day-and-date release strategy, the fact that Disney is, of course, in a lawsuit with Scarlett Johansson, which to me is pretty, I don't know, let's call it silly. But it's a very strange world that we live in. There's another COVID variant detected in the U.S. It was first identified in Japan. Let's see, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about also about the business. And a lot of it is, so if people don't know, IATSE is perhaps going to go on strike. The union, basically the Teamsters, you could say that in a way, I guess. Before its contract with negotiations with IATSE broke off, the AMPTP proposed making it much more difficult for workers to qualify for pensions by raising the qualification cutoff from the current 400 hours per year to 950. That would preclude hundreds, if not thousands, of IATSE members from earning pension credits each year, and is just one of the many issues on which the union says the two sides remain far apart. Union sources say that management will have to scale back this proposal significantly if a deal is to be made and a strike averted. The union, which is now in the process of seeking strike authorization from its members, had come to the bargaining table demanding sustainable benefits, but deems as unacceptable a more than doubling of the qualifying hours for pension credits. and is not at all what it had in mind to rescue the ailing plan. Instead, it's seeking higher contribution levels from employers and higher wages on which these contributions are made. The pension plan, which is part of the motion picture industry's pension and health plans, has for years been inching closer to critical condition, which by federal law is defined as anything below 65% as measured by a plan's assets divided by its liabilities. Its current funding level now stands at 68.9%, down from 80.8% in 2015. In 2019, the plan's actuary projected that it will be back up to 80% funded by 2026 and 100% funded by 2032. But that was before employer contributions to the plan took a major hit because of the pandemic. Year-end fair market value of the plan's assets was almost $3.8 billion as of December 31st, 2018. Now, all of this is happening because the landscape is changing. And to be honest with everyone, as we all know, it's not just streaming services. There's less money to go round. I mean, that's not to say that studios aren't making money, but the entire way people and things are financed and paid for in the motion picture business is really in a state of flux. And what's happening is, of course, are people, as always, you have management, you have the studios. Anything they can do to not pay people what they're worth, they will do. That's capitalism. How can we pay the least amount of people for the least amount of money to our people? It's been going on forever. That's why you have unions and things like IATSE in the first place, to make sure. I mean, I am both a worker and a producer in the motion picture business. So as the producer of a movie on Tango Shalom, I was also in charge of getting myself paid as the editor of the film. So in a way, I'm kind of both management. I'm on either side of the line. Should they make more money for the amount of time they put in? Yes. And the fact is, people who work in movies work very, very, very long hours. 12-hour days are the norm. And sometimes you can even end up working 6 days a week on independent movies. I've worked 7 days a week on films for weeks on end. And yet the real difference is now the studios, like say Disney Plus, the studios have a direct conduit to their consumers. So the whole economics have changed. And why does that make that good for the studios and actually good for the business? Because it stabilizes the revenue streams for the studios. The studios know, okay, we're going to make this much money every month from our streaming services. We know that our operating costs and everything that we have to do is this much. And they realize, I mean, a healthy streaming service means that you have constant cash flow and you aren't going to be destroyed by a huge bomb. If you've taken a risk on a $200 million movie that doesn't perform, you won't take a bath on it. That's why the streaming services are so important. However, the problem is the economics with the people that actually work on shows, especially above-the-line people who traditionally would get residuals or payments out, not just what they received when they made these television shows or movies. All of that is changing. The whole business is in flux, and everyone's trying to figure out how are we going to make this all work for everyone. So if this strike happens, it'll shut down the industry. Nothing will be made for quite some time, probably, because it sounds to me like IATSE and management are very far apart. But you never know, because there's nothing better than a strike to shut down the industry and get people back to the drawing board. But like everything else, people make incremental strides, but they never get exactly what they want, so it always tees up another strike 5 years, 10 years down the line, which is a bummer. But anyway, despite all of that, I'm still very optimistic about where we're going. I think we're getting a lot of great stuff. Look, I'm really looking forward to I'm a big fan of the MCU. I find it wildly entertaining. It's the realization of what I always wanted when I was a kid, collecting Marvel comic books, and even now as an adult. I'm looking very, very forward to the Eternals because I'm a huge Jack Kirby fan, and to see the Eternals writ large and a Neil Gaiman fan on the big screen, I can't wait. Can't wait. And I think the storyline is going to be quite surprising to a lot of people. At least I would assume so. I'm hoping. I don't really know anything about the Eternals other than what we've seen in the trailers and through educated guesses, but looks great to me. I'm very, very excited by that prospect. So, a lot of stuff happening in the entertainment business. Some of it really, really great. Some of it could be detrimental. But for the most part, people are still interested in movies. We just had the Emmys. I think a lot of great people were recognized at the Emmys for a lot of great work. I mean, no doubt about it, the streaming services, whether it's HBO Max, whether it's Apple, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Netflix, there's a lot of great material being made. And while we might not be getting all the most original giant movies at the box office, there's certainly a lot of great entertainment being made on the small screen. I mean, I was knocked out by Mayor of Easttown. I love The Queen's Gambit. A lot of great stuff. Very excited about what we've got coming down the pike. Now, I bet you're all very excited to hear any letters that might be coming down that you might have sent me, because you never know. People have sent me letters. You know who I'm going to start with, because this letter literally is at the top of my pile today. The Funkalicious Zephyr Chan wrote me a letter. That's right, our own Funkalicious Zephyr Chan. Dear Robert, I'm sincerely thrilled at the success of your independent film Tango Shalom. I really truly hope the distributors over at Vision Films will submit it to the Hong Kong International Film Festival, so it will be screened there next year. Well, thank you very much for that. Yes, this will be after the film's availability on paid video on demand, but let's hope the folks over at the Hong Kong Film Festival will not have seen it yet. Oh, and before I move on, I'd like to suggest the addition of the traditional Chinese subtitles for those in the audience whose native tongue isn't English but Chinese. Hey, if you want to help me do a Chinese subtitle track for Tango Shalom, count me in. I'm also genuinely thrilled at Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings' critical and commercial success, not only because it means that more Chinese and Chinese-American stories have a large audience, but more importantly because it sets an important precedent moving forward. What sort of precedent? This is a Chinese and Chinese-American tale that did amazingly well despite not being shown in mainland China. Yes, it was shown in Hong Kong and Taiwan, or the Republic of China, but those two places, one special administrative region and one independent country, have a population of roughly 7.507 million and 23.57 million, respectively. The People's Republic of China has a population of 1.398 billion. It's no wonder Hollywood executives and managers are adding scenes and telling their stars to issue groveling apologies in Mandarin in an effort to get their movies shown in that authoritarian country. Yet, first Joker, now Shang-Chi, and The Legend of the Ten Rings did well, even though they were not shown in the Middle Kingdom. I truly, genuinely hope that Shang-Chi's achievement will embolden filmmakers and showrunners of television and miniseries to create stories that are true to their visions. I do not want films or television and miniseries to be altered or censored in any way, shape, or form to conform to the wishes of the Chinese Communist Party in the hope of getting more money, be it in the form of hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. This is because the Chinese Communist Party is the regime that cultivated a cult of personality around Chairman Mao Zedong, a man whose failed policies led to the deaths of at least 45 million people and the destruction of an untold number of libraries, shrines, temples, and other monuments to Chinese culture. To the Chinese Communist Party, they are the country, so to be patriotically Chinese is to be devoutly loyal to the CCP. Just as Chairman Mao has his Little Red Book, so too does Chairman Xi Jinping have his Xi Jinping Thought, which is a mandatory learning in primary, secondary, and tertiary education all across China and even in Hong Kong. Mandarin is to be spoken at home. Snitching on others, even your parents, siblings, friends, or lovers, is encouraged and even rewarded. That is the China to which Chairman Xi wants to create. A unified masculine China of moderate prosperity where the two special administrative regions, Hong Kong and Macau, as well as the rogue province of Taiwan, are firmly under his boot. That's his ultimate wet dream. Of course, such an authoritarian People's Republic of China runs counter to the free and democratic West, yet so long as the Chinese Communist Party is the ruling regime, the country will never democratize. Why? Because it's the party that decides on the leader through a series of power struggles. The stronger China becomes, the less it will concede to the West's demand for it to do better on human rights and to liberalize. Taiwan did in the 1980s in order to retain American support. But unfortunately, the People's Republic of China is not and never will be the Republic of China so long as the CCP is in power. Taiwan is proof positive that a majority Han Chinese nation can democratize and embrace Western values of tolerance and respect for each other's innate and unalienable human rights, yet at the same time retain their own culture, which is Taiwanese and not Chinese. I must confess that my desire for the People's Republic of China to liberalize and democratize isn't completely selfless, because I want everyone in the world to be able to appreciate Louis Tan's television series adaptation of David Ignatius's novel Quantum Spy, which I'm in the middle of. That will never, ever pass the Chinese Communist Party's censorship board for two main reasons. One, it shows the Chinese Communist Party, and more specifically the Ministry of State Security, as the bad guys. And two, in an ideological battle between the Chinese and American ways of doing things and values, the American way won out. Harris Chang, the protagonist and character Lewis will play, has his loyalty questioned, but ultimately he's exonerated. As a martial artist and action star, the series will have out-of-this-world stunts and action. Lewis promises much on this Looper interview, but the action isn't what I'm interested in. The deeply layered character study and the portrayal of the PRC versus the US are. In the same interview, Lewis explained that the series will explore both sides of his heritage, Chinese and white. In his case, it's British, but Harris Chang is Chinese-American, so American it is. He seemed really adamant that the two sides are Chinese and American, so he will not alter it to be an exploration of North Korean and American or Russian and American, even if it is to please the CCP. I commend him for that, because it shows an integrity that not everyone in Hollywood has. Hang on, I'm going to get this link. I'm going to get the Louis Tan link so you can all read it. I'll put that in the live chat. And let me put it right here so you can read this Looper interview with Louis Tan. By the way, I don't think it's lost on anyone that Zephyr Chan has a great love of Mr. Tan. I think that's our hall pass. If not our hall pass, just a pass in general. But the action isn't what I'm interested in. So there you go. So he will not alter it to be an exploration of North Korean and American or Russian and American, even if it is to please the CCP. I commend him for that, because it shows an integrity that not everyone in Hollywood has. So in short, since this is veering on and a bit verbose, reaching over 1,000 words in 4 pages, I sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, hope that Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings will set an important and unignorable precedent for all Chinese and Chinese-American tales after it. Hollywood does not need the PRC's market for a film or series to be successful. On that note, stars of franchises should never be made to kowtow and apologize for making truthful comments, such as in the Republic of China, otherwise known as Taiwan or Formosa. It's an independent country. I'm glad Simu Liu hasn't been made to apologize for his approaching 4-year-old interview with the CBC, where he revealed his story. To do so would be to betray his parents and grandparents for making the decision to leave Harbin, the capital city of Heilongjiang, and the PRC's northern and easternmost province, which is bordered by Inner Mongolia to the west and Russia to the north and east. May you and everyone in the Post-Geek Singularity live long and prosper. God fucking speed, as Razor Fist is wont to say. Compassionately yours, the Funkalicious Zephyr Chan. Well, Zephyr, that's a great letter. There's a reason why you're getting a PhD, and I'm not. That is a fantastic letter, and I want to thank you for writing it. This is why we love you here. You can get all political, but really what it comes right down to it is you just want to be able to see Louis Tan everywhere you look. And I appreciate that. I used to feel that way about Sherilyn Fenn for a while. But what a great letter. Thank you for writing in. Very, very fun, to be honest. Well, if Zephyr Chan, the Funkalicious Zephyr Chan's going to write in, I'm going to follow that one right up with a letter from our own Willow Yang. Because why not? Why can't we have our 2 Chinese PhDs writing in on the channel at the same time? For those that might be new here, the lovely, lovely Willow Yang has been taking us on a journey through Star Trek. Classic Star Trek before the hostage crisis began in 2009. Which continues on even to this day. It just keeps getting worse. Oh, hi, Rob. This is Willow Yang. Now that I've finished the Enterprise series, I've turned my attention back to Voyager. I've recently had the opportunity to watch the 2-parter Scorpion. To give a recap, 2 Borg ships get destroyed by a mysterious alien race. Meanwhile, Voyager is approaching Borg territory and has discovered a pathway, which they named the Northwest Passage, that appears to be devoid of any Borgs. Janeway orders the Doctor to develop antibodies to fight against the Borg nanoprobes. As they enter Borg space, however, they get confronted by 15 Borg cubes. But the cubes ignore them and continue on their merry way. Kes has a vision in which she sees a pile of Borg bodies. The Voyager discovers that all of the Borg cubes they've just encountered have been destroyed, and while exploring the wreckage of one of the cubes, the crew comes across a pile of dead Borgs that Kes had seen. Kim gets attacked by an alien creature and is infected. The crew deduce that the Borg is at war with another race, species 8472, who has bioships and are apparently immune to the Borg's nanoprobes. The Doctor attempts to repurpose the Borg nanoprobes in order to cure Kim, while Janeway attempts to negotiate an alliance with the Borg, offering them a method to defeat their enemy in exchange for safe passage through their territory, and the Borg appears to accept. Chakotay, however, is uneasy about the idea and tells the fable of the scorpion and the frog to illustrate the point, except it's a fox in his version of the story rather than a frog. The Borg provides a representative to work with the humans, introducing 7 of 9. Janeway gets incapacitated during another attack by species 8472, and Chakotay decides to end their alliance. 7, however, manages to take control of the ship's dish and create a subspace rift that draws the Voyager inside. The crew learn that they are now in the realm where species 8472 came from, and that it was actually the Borg who had initiated the war with that race, wanting to assimilate them, but ended up biting off more than they could chew. Janeway is miraculously cured by the Doctor and resumes the alliance with the Borg, using their new weapons to destroy the ships of species 8472. 7 returns the Voyager back to the regular space and then turns on the Voyager and attempts to assimilate the ship. However, having anticipated the betrayal, Janeway calls Chakotay to use a neural transceiver to distract 7 long enough to sever her connection to the collective. Janeway and Chakotay have a heart-to-heart conversation, and the Voyager safely traverses through Borg space with the incapacitated 7 on board. The end. My main criticism of Scorpion is that I do feel the Doctor was pretty much being used as a deus ex machina in the episode. He invents a miracle cure for Kim, very quickly develops an extremely effective weapon against the seemingly much more advanced species 8472, and then invents a miracle cure for Janeway that brings her out of a coma just in the nick of time. Moreover, and this really isn't a direct critique of the episode itself, I do have some mixed feelings about the evolution of the Borg throughout the Star Trek franchise. On one hand, I do think it is very much a Star Trekian thing to present an enemy who seemed initially monstrous and irredeemable, and then having the two main characters being still able to negotiate and find common ground with them. On the other hand, there is still a bit of disappointment that I feel seeing the Borg being turned into just another alien species. They were formidable and terrifying during their first introduction in Next Generation. Antagonists, too, to borrow a quote from the Terminator, don't feel pity or remorse or fear, and absolutely will not stop until they have achieved their goal of assimilation. I, Borg, an episode that I happen to quite like, brought humanity to the Borg, and in that process also somewhat neuters them. By revealing that they can, in fact, be deprogrammed, the Borg are no longer unstoppable, no longer an existential threat. And now in Scorpion, the Voyager crew is able to form a temporary alliance with them as they are being faced with an even more powerful foe, a somewhat overused plot device. What do I think that Scorpion has done very well in the depiction of the dynamic between Janeway and Chakotay and their contrasting philosophies? Well, as this was the case of an earlier episode, Resolutions, where the two got marooned together on a deserted planet, making for some good shipping scenarios, Janeway is determined to return back home no matter what, whereas Chakotay appears willing to accept their situation and adapt. At what point is the risk of having to travel through hostile enemy space just too great compared to the reward of getting back home? Should the Voyager crew just accept that they'll be stuck in the Delta Quadrant and colonize an uninhabited planet? Personally, I do think that option is preferable to certain destruction. However, the situation is further complicated by the presence of species 8472. The crew are essentially facing a real Kobayashi Maru, a no-win scenario. If they assist the Borg, they will be helping them commit genocide against another race and probably making their ranks even more powerful. On the other hand, species 8472 certainly does not appear to be a particularly friendly race either. And if they defeated the Borg, they could very well prove to be even worse foes. I liked seeing the struggle between Janeway and Chakotay as they grappled with the scenario, and I really appreciated that the writers didn't hold back, but actually had Chakotay taking over the ship and breaking the Borg alliance against Janeway's explicit wishes after the latter was temporarily incapacitated in the second half of the two-parter. The fact of the matter, however, is that neither Janeway nor Chakotay were wrong. While the risk that Janeway took by agreeing to an alliance did ultimately allow Voyager to get one step closer to home, Chakotay was right in anticipating the treachery of the Borg and unveiling that they were actually the ones who struck the first blow in the war against Species 8472. This plays well into the contrast between the human characters and the Borg, the efficacy of being a singular unit versus a group of free-thinking individuals. Seven criticized the humans, saying that they are erratic, conflicted, and disorganized. Every decision is debated, every action questioned. Every individual entitled to their own small opinion. Ultimately, though, it was the humans who, by being able to bring their own individual views while still working together and cooperating, were ultimately able to prevail and achieve what the Borg was unable to do. The philosophical debates aside, I really enjoyed the action in Scorpion. The cold open sets up the tone very well, with a scene of two Borg cubes confronting another alien ship using the familiar line, "Resistance is futile," only to get quickly blown up into smithereens. The image of the pile of dead Borg bodies was effectively grotesque and somewhat reminiscent to me of Flans Floris's The Fall of the Rebellious Angels. I also really liked the design of Species 8472 and appreciated that the episode doesn't reveal too much about them apart from the fact that they're from another dimension, essentially making them into what the Borg were before they were demystified. There are Star Trek episodes that present great philosophical debates, and there are Star Trek episodes that have great horror and action sequences, and I do think Scorpion managed to do both effectively. Live long and prosper, Willow. Well, Willow, I do think Scorpion was certainly a highlight. Obviously, introducing 7 of 9 is something that greatly impacted Voyager. I do, as much as I love, like, David Mack's Destiny trilogy, which is like the ultimate Borg story, and offers a pretty fascinating origin of the Borg, I was hoping, personally for me, that the Borg origin and what the Borg were, I've always seen the Borg as being tragic. Obviously, the Borg Queen is something that we met that, by the way, made no sense to me at all. Not after what we've seen. I don't like the fact that the Borg have a leader. What I thought was really interesting, in my mind, the way I would have gone if I was writing on Star Trek, I would have made the Borg an accident. It was in a bid to be transhuman, in a bid to figure out ways to, through biotechnology, to fuse the human body with machines to make us live longer and be more versatile and all those things. That kind of tech ran away with the society, and eventually they were entirely consumed by this technology of their own creation, and that technology spread out amongst the stars to assimilate everything. And that's why the idea that you could rescue Picard and turn him back from Locutus back into himself proves that the Borg, and they did that in Best of Both Worlds, Part 2. And I would have thought that would be enough, that, okay, that it's more like an infection. When you're a Borg, when you become a Borg, you've been, essentially you're a techno-zombie, but you can be cured. I like that idea, until, in fact, that maybe the connection with humanity or whatever leads the Borg to figure out ways around so you could never be. Like, once Picard was reassimilated or taken back to being his human self, the Borg would have learned the secret and they would have adapted, so you couldn't do that anymore. But the fact that you could do it proves that even if someone is Borgified, they can be turned back into a human being. They can be essentially rescued. And yet, in First Contact, we see people that are being assimilated from the crew just slaughtered. Which, it was First Contact started to get really iffy with the Borg for me, and Voyager continued on that trend. But I do think, that said, Scorpion 1 and 2 is a pretty great two-parter. And I liked it. So, yeah. I'm glad that you liked it. I always like hearing from you. And I can't wait to get your next review. This next letter comes from Roger Robertson. Greetings, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity. I saw you today on the John Campea show and heard your discussion about how long will the Spider-Man Sony Marvel deal be continuing, given the rumors that Tom Hardy being in No Way Home. This is what I believe has happened with the deal. I think that when this deal was brought from the brink of death by Bob Iger 2 years ago, I believe that Marvel and Disney made a determination to do anything possible to keep Spider-Man in the MCU. I believe this includes Marvel agreeing that Sony properties such as Venom, Morpheus, etc. will be able to be referred to or make connections in their stories to the MCU. Now, Doctor Strange will never be in a Venom movie, and Morpheus will never be in a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, but I think the decision to allow these story connections was agreed on. Sony would be all too happy to agree to this, with Spider-Man being in the MCU. Their two movies have grossed more than any other Spider-Man property. I think that many would also attribute some of Venom's success to Sony's link to the MCU. If Marvel would agree, and I believe they did, for Spider-Man to be an active player in their other Sony properties, I think they would be overjoyed. So do I. So long as their property's box office receipt continue to beat anything they've done in the past, they'll want this relationship to continue. I agree with everything you've said here. The main question would be, why would Marvel agree to this? I believe that this may have been the last outgoing action by Bob Iger. God, how I miss him. And I'm sure Kevin Feige agreed to this, as Bob would never force something like this down Kevin's throat. I think Bob Iger's pitch was, Spider-Man is the biggest name in Marvel. It has been historically. It continues to be in merchandising, and there's no reason to expect this to change in the future. Maybe more than any other single character, Spider-Man needs to be in the MCU, and if the cost to this is to allow Sony to include properties to connect to the MCU, I believe they would. What would be the risk? What would be the downside? Especially since Kevin Feige is consulting on these properties from Sony. Marvel can give notes, but we've already seen what happens if Sony doesn't get something right with the 8 years later in Homecoming. Sure, fanboys came out of the rafters with charts and graphs, but there was not any decay of the MCU's foundation. There was not any paradox which shook reality that needed mending. Anything that happens can always be attributed to a faulty narration. So, is this agreement binding? Why no announcement? I don't believe that a long-term deal was signed by anyone. There will always be a point where Sony can ask for too much, and this will only go on as long as Sony wants it to, but I don't know why they would want it to stop. I will wrap up with what I believe is evidence that this agreement between Marvel and Sony took place. Ever since Avengers Campus opened in Disneyland, I was taken aback with how much of the area was dominated by Spider-Man. I think they could have named the section of the park Spider-Land. Why would Marvel and Disney put something which may soon be ending its cinematic relationship with up front and center? Good question. It's not just Disneyland either. Disney uses its characters to push all of their ventures, and I believe that they wanted the number one brand in their pantheon to remain their most visible medium, the MCU. Robert, it's always a good pleasure discussing these items with you in the Post-Geek Singularity. Good health to you and yours. That comes to us from Roger Robertson. Well, Roger, I tend to think you are correct. I think we're just not privy to all of the details. I mean, obviously, if word out from early screenings of Venom, Let There Be Carnage, are to be believed, well, I won't say what they are because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but let's just say that it looks to me that the Sony Spider-Verse and the MCU are definitely coming closer together. And that makes sense to me. I mean, obviously, Venom takes place in San Francisco, so we haven't really seen that other than Ant-Man. Ant-Man exists in San Francisco, but what's not to love? By the way, I don't know if you notice, our air conditioning is on here, but it's over 100 degrees today, and man, it's hot in here. It's dry heat out there, but I'm soaking wet. So, but no, I think you're right. I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship. I think what's going to happen is that already Sony releases the Spider-Man movies, and I think, having Spider-Man in the MCU and Sony being able to make $1 billion off the last Spider-Man movie it's all a good thing. I mean, who knows what the Marvel cut is to come in and help produce the films, but still, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And I think you're absolutely right about that. I think that is an ongoing relationship that can last. However, remember, there's no reason for them to tell us anything about what their deal is. It's not our business. I mean, who cares? And as long as we're getting good movies, if Spider-Man does in fact go back to the MCU and Spider-Man's going to take on Venom and Carnage for a movie, bring it on. I mean, I don't think that's going to necessarily affect the MCU. And, the idea is you don't have to see, it's just like you don't see all your friends every day. You don't need to see every superhero in every movie. I mean, one day someone's talking to Spider-Man, another day they might be hanging out with Bruce Banner, or another day, you might have Captain Marvel drops in. So you don't have to have, I think we're, as fans, a little too obsessed with well, why wasn't so-and-so here? Well, why do they have to be there? Like, I didn't show up every time someone does something geeky. Like, I go to the San Diego Comic-Con. I've never been to the New York Comic-Con, but does that mean that I shouldn't be in that universe? Or, you know, you just have to come on over and hang out with me. And I don't understand this. There's a weird obsession, I think, in fan circles. Well, this person, how come the X-Men haven't revealed themselves? Well, why should they? I mean, we think of the X-Men being on the world stage, but they don't have to be on the world stage in the MCU. Not yet. They could be hiding in the shadows where mutants have always been. How are they going to explain Blade? Are we going to find out that half of New York is run by like some vampire group and we just haven't seen him? I'd buy that. Actually, that'd be pretty cool. I'd like to see that happen. Is Deacon Frost going to show up and be like, yeah, I own half of New York. Half of New York. This next letter comes from Mr. Gregory Smith. You know him, you love him. He was the inspiration of the very first Robservations show. Hi, Rob. The other day, I was doing deferred maintenance to my 1988 VW Vanagon after having owned this for about 2 years. I assume since you're on Facebook, you might have seen me post about various car projects there. I have. My propensity to do it yourself is part of what led me to build my own Star Wars costumes and now 3 different full-scale props. For those of you who don't know, Greg Smith built a full-scale land speeder, a full-scale Imperial probe droid from the beginning of Empire, and a full-scale speeder from Empire. Anyway, it got me thinking about the people in our favorite film stories that do this kind of thing, and I came to a startling realization. We're both James Bond fans, so we know how they used to say women want James Bond and men want to be James Bond. So here's my point. I don't want to be James Bond. I want to be Q. Q, or Quartermaster, is the person at MI6 who works tirelessly behind the scenes to create the gadgets that Bond uses on his missions. I could see myself figuring out how to hide the daggers and gold coins in Bond's From Russia with Love briefcase, or the various hidden armaments in his DB5 or Esprit. I enjoy trying to keep agents alive as opposed to doing the actual fighting, which frankly looks exhausting and not a small amount of dangerous and painful. I suppose the only drawback to my idea is that I wouldn't meet as many exotic women, and well, say, today's MI6 HR would frown upon inter-office romances. This idea is the same for other stories too. I don't want to be Batman. I'm more of an Alfred. I would be the one who provides all of Batman's wonderful toys. I guess that would make you Lucius Fox. In the MCU, I guess I'd be Jarvis, or maybe Tony, who at least designs and builds his own stuff, or did. Or even better, Shuri, the genius sister of T'Challa. She's also pretty badass. In Star Wars, I guess I'd be an X-Wing mechanic or a geeky Imperial scientist studying Grogu. My favorite Boba Fett may have done his own work, but it wasn't really shown. In The Mandalorian, at least, we see Din Djarin fixing his non-Beskar armor after various battles. So here's my question. What do you think? Have you ever wanted to be a supporting or background character? If so, who would you prefer to be? Thanks and congrats on the accolades Tango Shalom is getting. It's great. Gregory Smith. That's a good question, Greg. You know, if you didn't want to be the hero, who would you want to be? I guess, I mean, if I was captain of the Enterprise, you'd be Scotty. I like that idea because, you know, so often we're positioned as being front and center. I mean, I know he died off screen, but I could see myself being Hicks in Aliens. Like, maybe I'm not leading the squadron or whatever, but I survive with the help of the heroine. You know, I like to be like, I'd be providing the able assist for the hero. I'll be Corporal Hicks. But let's face it, I mean, I always want to be Captain Kirk. But that's not your question. I mean, I'd want to be somebody that was like, I'm content when I worked on Tango Shalom. I'm not the director. I'm his editor, and I really enjoyed that position. I guess in a way, it's kind of like being Q in terms of editing a film. I wouldn't mind that at all. I think that would be absolutely lots of fun, to tell you the truth. I'd quite enjoy that. So what about you guys? Tell me in the chat below. If you weren't going to be the hero, would you like to be a secondary character? And what secondary character would you be? I like this idea. I think it's a good question that we all have that probably would serve us well to answer more often. let's see. What is next? I can't decide. You know what? I think I'm going to jump over and see what y'all are saying over here in the chat. What are you saying? First of all, sends in a super chat sticker. So thank you for that. Of course, Willow, always in there, always Johnny on the spot with the first tip. Willow said, Campia mentioned that he gets invited to the Adult Video News Awards every year, but has never gone to one. Have you attended the Adult Video News Awards? And if so, would you persuade John Campia to go? I have not, but I've had friends I've worked with win AVN Awards. As a matter of fact, my friend Bryn Pryor has even won an Adult AVN Award for screenwriting, which I find that endlessly amusing. So, yeah, I love that. Would I convince him to go? You know, I mean, I would go to the Adult Video News Awards just for fun. Like, I'd love to do something like that. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I did, because I knew Bryn, I was afforded to meet. I actually had one of my favorite adult stars who's no longer in the business. Trina Michaels came to my birthday party once. That was pretty cool. So it'd be fun. I mean, I'm sure it's a big party. Yeah. So would I convince John to go? You know, John has told me that he has real social anxiety in public situations. I've got a little glimpse of that. And I don't know, it might make John uncomfortable. You know, John is very much devoted to his wife, who, let's face it, quite a hot lady. And accomplished. She's got 2 master's degrees. I mean, she's incredibly well educated. She's highly sought after as an executive in what she does. So, you know, I think John is doing just fine in that area. I don't know if I could get him to go. I'd probably have an easier time getting his wife Ann to go than get John to go, because Ann's pretty fearless. So who knows? I could ask him. We could all go. It'd be a night out. 200-Watt Studio sends in a super chat. Hello, sir. While I agree with you on that restaurant owner kicking the people out was not good, how about the Emmys, where the entire theater was full of maskless celebrities with not 2 feet between them? Hey, you know what? I don't... what can I say? I don't even... At this point, I don't know. I don't know what to say. You know, clearly... We'll just see where it all goes. I mean, look, the real problem, the real fear, I think, is that what people are forgetting is that this virus is still very much with us and can mutate. It seems to be a gain-of-function virus, so the more people that it can infect and mutate, the more dangerous it is. I mean, obviously, this new variant that it's the third, it's beyond Delta. There was one more variant. I keep wanting to say it was the Karma variant, but it's not. And then there's one variant after that. It's going to keep evolving. And if we're not, like, the issue should not be, and I understand, you know, everyone feels their rights are being taken away from them and things are slipping away. And that might very well be true. But we still have the issue of how do we tamp down this pandemic? The statistic now, more people have died of COVID than died in the Spanish influenza outbreak of 100 years ago. I do think that we need to start thinking about how do we get rid of this virus? What can we do to get rid of it? And obviously, look, Israel's had a tough time. They had everyone vaxxed pretty much, and the outbreaks are still happening. It's a tough bug. And I understand we Americans, we have a very healthy distaste of authority. I get where that's coming from. I know. And it didn't help. I heard a guy on NPR today who has been covering the outbreak since the beginning, and he said a lot of the fault has to do with the messaging. People don't know who to trust because there was so much do this, do that, change this, change that, and it wasn't good. And he even pointed out, like, our own CDC is not used to doing things at warp speed. They're used to doing things carefully and methodically, as they should. So no one was really prepared for this, and we shall see. We shall see. Sonny Dominguez says Evil Dead is... 200-Watt Studio sends in another super chat and says, Rob, please don't spoil Dune. I'm still reading the first book. All right, well, just watch out for the Bene Gesserit and the Gom Jabbar. I won't spoil it. Can you spoil Dune? Is it possible? Sonny Dominguez. Once again, Sonny, thanks for coming out and going to see Tango. Shalom. Sonny says, Evil Dead is showing at the AMC 16 on October 7th. Thoughts of a PGS gathering? The Pierce brothers' father did the effects on the movie. Maybe he can attend. By the way, when are you seeing New Order? Review it, please. Alex and I have been waiting to talk to you about it. I know, I got to get it. I don't know when it's coming out. I'm dying to see it. Dying. Speaking of getting stuff, you know what finally came in the mail today? I got to show this. I mean, I'll show this on Let's Get Physical Media, but my Studio Canal box set for The Thing that rounds out, it's the 5th of the Studio Canal Carpenter box sets that they've released. I'm very excited to have this. It comes with all kinds of goodies, including the soundtrack. So that's cool. Happy to have that. But Evil Dead could be fun. That could be a fun time, is had by all. 200 Watt Studio says, just like any anti-vaxxer, any celebrity that didn't wear a mask at the Emmys should be denied medical help if they get the COVID. Take it seriously, please. Well, that's the thing I worry about, is not taking it seriously. But, you know, I mean, what can I say? I mean, I like to err on the side of caution. But even Mike, my doctor friend, his 17-year-old daughter got pericardia, something, inflammation of the heart because of the vaccine. I mean, what can you say to that? There's still risks involved, and we don't know what the long-term risks are. Justin Jorgensen, 1 of 2, says, hey, Rob, this past week I registered my favorite action movie of all time. This past week I registered my favorite action movie of all time, Transformers Dark of the Moon. Like I've said, the last 45 minutes is an epic masterpiece. I watched a video essay on the movie, and it raised some very valid points that people don't give director Michael Bay credit enough for. The stuff you see in Dark of the Moon can only be seen in Dark of the Moon. The high-rise sequence, the entire Chicago finale, everything has a distinct flair that even directors like Spielberg and Chris Nolan have pointed out. Bay has definitely made some bad movies, but Dark of the Moon isn't one. I love it. Well, I have to tell you, I love Dark of the Moon too. I love the first Transformers, but I especially love Dark of the Moon because it's huge and goofy and fun. It's exactly what a Transformers movie should be. And the action sequence is the destruction of Chicago. Come on, man. That's some of the best action, special effects, craziness. And Cinefex didn't even do an article on that movie. I didn't like it. Mike Prez says, hey, Rob, I'm always learning new words from you. I'm curious, the word academic. What is the definition of the word when you use it? It kind of sounds like a situation that's out of individual control and not regarding personal beliefs. That's kind of what it is. I've always used the word academic to mean like there's really only one course of action. Like if your car is running out of gas, well, that situation's academic. You know, you must fill your car up with gas or your engine is going to not work. So it's not like you can argue the point. Like, I don't know, I want to get out to that restaurant, but my gas tank is almost empty and I don't know if there's no choice. There's only one answer. Now let's look it up together. Let's see if I'm using the word properly. Academic definitions: relating to education and scholarship, not of practical relevance, of only theoretical interest. A teacher or scholar in college or an institute of higher education. So of not practical relevance. I would see it as the opposite of that. To me, it is of theory. Maybe I've been using it wrong. Not of practical relevance. The debate has been largely academic. See, to me, when I say something's academic, I don't think it's theoretical at all. I mean, you've learned it. You've learned the answer to the problem because you've gone to academia, you've gone to higher education. But maybe I'm doing it wrong because, to me, if something's academic, it means I learned this already. I learned that when your car runs out of gas, you need gas. You need to put in it. There is no. But this is saying the exact opposite. Not of practical relevance, of only theoretical interest. Well, hey, maybe I've been using it wrong all these years. You learn something new every single day. But that's interesting. Academic. Could it be theoretical? I guess so. But I've never thought things being academic as being theoretical. I mean, there's lots of theories, but there's also facts that are taught in academia. Not lately, though. Just kidding. The Jughead says, Rob, I'm looking forward to the latest Bond movie, which comes out over here in the UK later this month. My favorite Bonds, Connery, Moore, Lazenby, Craig, Brosnan, and Dalton. Well, would that be most of them? No, you've got them all there. What about Barry Nelson in the original Casino Royale, which I have on Blu-ray, with Peter Lorre as Le Chiffre? I mean, come on now. I know people are going, wait, what? That's right. There was a version of Casino Royale done for American television that stars Barry Nelson as Jimmy Bond, an American agent, and Peter Lorre is Le Chiffre. And it is on Blu-ray. So you can get it. You can get it. Rhett Proctor sends in a super chat and says, I grew up watching Star Wars, and when I was a baby in 1994, my uncle passed away, and he was a huge Star Trek fan. I couldn't get into it, but wasn't Star Wars inspired by Star Trek in a way? Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, Star Wars was... I do think that George Lucas was looking at a lot of things, like, of course, the Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers serials. Like, famously, he couldn't get the rights. I think it was the rights to do Flash. He either couldn't get the rights to... I think it was Flash Gordon. He couldn't get the rights to it. But I think Star Wars was influenced by the serials the same way that Raiders of the Lost Ark was. And then, George Lucas in the 70s wanted to do a fairy tale for kids because it was a dark time in real life. And movies were very, very dark, and both in subject matter and I think that the post-Vietnam movies especially, we're in a terrible... When you can turn on the news and you see body bags of American soldiers being brought back on the news, I think George Lucas wanted to create something new and fun. And that's where Star Wars came out of. But it was absolutely inspired by Star Trek because Star Trek was fun, and you had indelible characters. But don't forget that a lot of Star Wars was inspired by the films of Kurosawa, whether it was The Hidden Fortress, which has direct visual references to Star Wars, The Wipes, things like that, Seven Samurai, also World War II movies. But I think Kurosawa was a big influence on Star Wars and George Lucas. Can you get into Star Wars today, though? I mean, Star Trek today, if you tried watching it. Have you tried it? Jeff Yerke and Mrs. Y send in a tip and says, hey, Rob, I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan. I always have been. I hate his politics, but I've long enjoyed his films. So ambled over to see Cry Macho. Script was flawed and improbable. Clint is flat out too old, and his message is self-serving. It did not make my day. Well, I don't think you're the only one, Jeff. Yeah, I have to say that I am not an ageist in any way, but I think a 91-year-old guy still trying to be... I mean, Clint Eastwood is 91 playing that part, but I don't know about how much verisimilitude there is in it. And I know the script was written... The actual script, I've talked about it on the show, is written in the early 70s. It couldn't get made. Then it was rewritten as a novel, and then that novel got some traction, and the script has been sold over the years. It took almost 50 years, to get to the screen, and I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, Glenn Mark, actually Win Goddess sends in a super chat. I love the idea of a wind goddess. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Glenn Mark in NZ. I'm currently composing a verbal letter, a movie review. How long of a verbal letter are you okay with? I might have to send it in 2 parts. Cheers. Well, I've never had anyone send me a verbal letter before. Most people would turn something like that into a YouTube video, but I'll play it. I would say, well, again, how scintillatingly interesting are you? Are you very interesting? Because maybe you could, a letter could be 2 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. It depends. If it's good, it's good. So yeah, I don't know. You know what? I leave it up to you because I honestly don't know how long I would play a verbal letter for, because I've never had anyone send one. Could be pretty cool though. I'd be into it. Alexander Wilson says thoughts on IATSE voting for a strike. How does this affect the making of films, and how does that affect you? Well, I am not currently working on a feature in a production capacity, but it could very well affect me. I am not a member of any of the guilds, but I'm also not going to cross picket lines of the guilds because I believe in the guilds. And so if that were the case, the couple of projects that I'm working on that are in development, we'd have to shut them down because I'm not willing to cross those picket lines. But I think that, well, we'll see where it's going to go. I mean, hopefully, but it's not good. It seems to me like, I mean, again, if they find some 11th hour solution, maybe. It sounds like it's going to happen because you know what? I think in a way it almost has to happen because nobody is playing. They're playing a little too fast and loose. I think they need, people need assurances. The wages in this business have been. A friend of mine said it best. He said we've all been, especially at the level that I work at, we've all become professional hobbyists. We can't make a living doing what we do, especially at the low budget level. I used to be able to. I can't now. 20 years ago, I got paid really well for my editorial prowess. Now everyone's got computers at home and nobody thinks that it's worth paying for, even though it's one of the most difficult and important parts of a movie is your post-production, your editorial. So I think it probably will happen. The Jughead sends, that reminds me of a Prince song. Sends in a super chat and says, "Hi Rob, second command backup, buddy. Jughead to Archie, of course." Okay, Jughead to Archie, of course. Not the Prince song. Laugh out loud. Love and respect from the UK, bro. Well, I know you've cleared that up, so you're like Spock to Kirk. I love it. I think that's great. Lieutenant Commander Salinga sends in a tip and says, "The main conflict of today is still the enlightened worldview based on the scientific method and empirical evidence and the pre-enlightened worldview based on anecdotal evidence. The culture of enlightenment is very young, still revolutionary in our history." Well, Lieutenant Commander Salinga, I believe in that 100%. I believe in the scientific method and empirical evidence. You need the scientific method and empirical evidence because if we want to do anything, we have combustible engines, we have computers, we fly, we can build skyscrapers. All of those things are based on the scientific method and empirical evidence. Unfortunately, in this country, we've seen a lot of people who. How many stories do we have to read about families that didn't believe in a vaccine or didn't believe in wearing masks, and now we have kids that have lost both parents? I mean, it's not good, but yeah, which is a bummer. Brandon Sheehy says, "Rob, I've heard criticism about the Hawkeye trailer that Clint isn't depressed and engulfed with guilt regarding his tenure as Ronin. Why? He was wiping out ruthless criminals all characters in the MCU have killed. I'm fine with a non-gloomy Hawkeye." I'm with you. I mean, Hawkeye was a secret agent. He worked with Natasha. I mean, Clint Barton killed people, at least in the MCU. Maybe he wasn't an assassin, but he was definitely an agent. We saw some of the shenanigans they would get up to and say Black Widow, and people died. So, I mean, yeah, did he become a ruthless assassin of criminals as Ronin? Yeah. And did he throw himself into it because his family was dusted? Yeah. But he was going after people he perceived as needing killing. He went out for vigilante justice. I don't think that he has PTSD, and I think they're going to deal with that. I think they are going to deal with that. Tomas says, "I think you're using academic as empirically decided." Yes, that is exactly how I've been using academic. Empirically decided. It's funny to me that I went and actually there are other definitions I didn't look at. Those are just the first two, and adjective and noun. But yes, as empirically decided, that's how I've always thought it was academic. That's how I've always used it. That's a good way to put it. A good way to put it. Well, listen, everyone. I'm going to try and go on Justin's. Justin sent me a link to go on his channel at 5. I'm going to bring this one to a close, but this episode to a close, episode number 743. But I did want to remind everyone that Tango Shalom is opening in Columbus, Ohio. It is still in Palm Springs. It is still playing in Florida, which is good. Once again, Tango Shalom is your indie Jewish spiritual quest family dance comedy fable. I think the fable part's being missed by some people. And for the most part, people have enjoyed it. I don't know, if you can get out and see it and support the channel, support me, support the filmmakers who made it, that'd be great. And again, it's opening in Ohio. It's in Miami. I mean, for our little independent movie to still be running after 4 weeks in a pandemic environment with no advertising, I can't believe it. But I hope you see it. And if you can't, it'll be on VOD on October 29th. And it will be opening theatrically in Russia. And it looks like, well, assuming whenever the pandemic lockdowns are over in Australia, it's going to be going to Australia as well. There are a number of foreign territories that it'll also be playing in. I just don't have the information on all of those yet. And on that note, I want to thank everybody that supports the channel via Super Chats and tips. I want to thank all of my moderators. We got Lord Toth, Justin Jorgensen, Louise X. Sparrow, Justin Toner. I think, who else is here? I don't know who else is here. I don't know if Joshua Levesque was here, but I want to thank all of you for being great mods, great blue wrenches. And on that note, I'm going to bring back, I know I've been saying it, but I have less and less responsibilities now. I was part of this marketing team for Tango Shalom, but I have less and less responsibility in that arena, so I'll be much more available. And I have a lot of PGS All-Stars to put up. We've got episodes of Set to Stun that are going to go up, and so we're going to see a lot more of that on the channel, and I'll be on the channel a lot more than I have been. Whining About Movies is coming back. We're going to finish the film festival. There's a lot to talk about. And on that note, I would ask everyone to watch the Designing Hollywood podcast. I get to go do another interview tomorrow with the Emmy Award-winning costume designer of WandaVision, who also did the costumes for everything from John Carter to the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder. I mean, I cannot wait. Cannot wait. Anyway, on that note, remember, everybody you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And on that note, I would say to everyone, have a better day.